Okay, so when you think of Ohio, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Maybe flat fields or presidential elections? For a lot of folks, it's just a name on a map. But what if I told you the story of Ohio is actually one of the most dramatic stories in the whole country? A story that, in so many ways, is the story of America itself.
Right, let's just tackle the big one right off the bat, the whole flyover state thing. For so many people, that's exactly what Ohio is, a patch of land you see from 30,000 feet on your way to somewhere else. But is that really all there is to it?
No, not even close. The truth is, if you really want to understand the American story, Ohio is one of the most essential places to look. Its history is, as one analysis puts it, a true microcosm of the American experience. Seriously, from ancient civilizations all the way to our high-tech future, Ohio has been the stage for America's greatest triumphs, its toughest conflicts, and its biggest transformations. To really get this, we've got to rewind the clock. I mean, way back. Thousands of years before the United States was even a glimmer of an idea. The human story here starts with these incredibly sophisticated cultures that literally shaped the earth under our feet.
And you can see this amazing progression over time. First, you have the Adena people, and they're building these giant conical burial mounds, some over 65 feet high. Then come the Hopewell, who take things to another level with massive, complex, geometric earthworks. And later, the Fort Ancient people show up, and they introduce intensive corn farming and the bow and arrow. Each culture was building on what the last one learned, creating this incredibly deep layer of human history. Okay, now this part is just mind-blowing. Archaeologists who were studying the Hopewell sites, like the famous Newark earthworks, they found something incredible. A recurring unit of measurement, 1,053 feet. This exact same standard shows up across different complexes, miles and miles apart. It's proof that these ancient people had this advanced grasp of geometry and astronomy that let them engineer these massive, super precise structures. And the Hopewell weren't some isolated culture either. They were at the heart of a trade network that stretched across the entire continent. I mean, just look at this. We're talking copper from the Great Lakes, obsidian that came all the way from the Yellowstone area, and shells from the Gulf of Mexico. And it was all flowing into southern Ohio. It was a true continental crossroads, thousands of years before Europeans ever showed up. All right, so that brings us to the next massive chapter. After the American Revolution, Ohio becomes the frontier. It's the place where the brand new United States is going to figure out its future through settlement, through treaties, and through violent conflict with the native peoples who already called it home. Now here's a really key detail. Ohio wasn't settled in one neat, tidy way. A huge chunk of it, about 4.2 million acres, was set aside by Virginia. Why? To pay its Revolutionary War soldiers with land, because they didn't have cash. And this one decision created a totally unique and kind of chaotic pattern of settlement. And you can see the result right here. While most of the new territory was carved up into a neat grid system, the Virginia Military District used something called meets and bounds. Surveyors just used landmarks, from the big oak tree down to the bend in the river. This led to these crazy, irregular plots of land, overlapping claims, and legal battles that went on for generations. It's a perfect snapshot of frontier chaos versus federal order. Of course, this American expansion wasn't happening in an empty land. It was met with incredibly fierce resistance, led by figures like the great Shawnee leader Tecumseh. He put together this pan-Indian confederacy to try and stop the Americans, arguing that no single tribe had the right to sell the land that belonged to all of them. This quote just captures his vision perfectly. Unity was the only path to survival. But, as we know, that push westward was pretty much unstoppable. And by the 19th century, Ohio's role starts to shift big time. It transforms from this contested frontier into the industrial engine that's going to power a rapidly growing America. The absolute key to this whole transformation: water. Starting in 1825, Ohio took on this monumental project, building a canal system to connect the Ohio River all the way to Lake Erie. This was an incredible feat of engineering. We're talking about digging over 800 miles of waterways, mostly by hand. And it would completely open up the state's farmland to the markets on the East Coast and really the entire world. And the economic payoff, it was just staggering. Before the canals, if you wanted to ship 1 ton of goods from Cincinnati to New York, it would cost you $125. Afterwards, that cost plummeted to just $25. That one change completely supercharged Ohio's economy. Suddenly, it was profitable to ship farm goods and manufactured products everywhere. And all this new connectivity, well, it gave rise to industrial titans. Up in Cleveland, a guy named John D. Rockefeller founded Standard Oil. And it didn't just dominate the oil business, it created this entire industrial ecosystem around it. Chemical companies popped up to supply the acids for refining, steel mills made the barrels and pipelines, and machine tool companies built all the equipment. Northern Ohio became a world-class manufacturing powerhouse. So when you have that much economic muscle, political power is sure to follow. Ohio's unique position as this crossroads of people and ideas, part Eastern, part Midwestern, part Appalachian, it turned the state into the nation's ultimate political bellwether. And this influence wasn't just about who won the White House. It was about the huge moral questions of the day. Remember, Ohio was separated from the slave state of Kentucky by just a river. This made it the single most active route on the Underground Railroad. It's estimated that 40,000 freedom seekers out of 100,000 total passed through Ohio on their journey to safety. Just an incredible number.
And that brings us to presidential elections, which is where Ohio's reputation really gets cemented. Sure, it's called the mother of presidents for producing 7 of them, but its real claim to fame is its status as a bellwether. I mean, check out the streak from 1964 to 2016. It's astonishing. For over 50 years, whichever way Ohio voted, that's the way the whole nation voted. In fact, no Republican has ever won the presidency without winning Ohio. Ever. But as we've seen so many times in American history, that golden era of prosperity didn't last forever. The 20th century brought a really painful decline, as those same industries that built Ohio up started to crumble, forcing the state to try and reinvent itself all over again, this time from the Rust Belt to what many are hoping will become the Silicon Heartland.
For a lot of people, the beginning of the end has a very specific, very painful date. On what everyone started calling Black Monday, the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company announced it was closing its Campbell Works. Just like that, 5,000 people were out of a job. It was a devastating shock that really signaled the beginning of deindustrialization for the whole region.
And that was just the first domino to fall. The shockwave from that one closure was brutal. Those initial 5,000 layoffs were just the start. Within 5 years, another 45,000 jobs had vanished from the Mahoning Valley as other steel mills and related businesses all collapsed. The Steel Valley had become the Rust Belt. But after decades of real struggle, a totally new story is starting to take shape. And it starts with this number, $28 billion. That's the massive initial investment that Intel is making to build brand new semiconductor plants right in central Ohio. It's a huge bet that the state can make the pivot from heavy industry to high-tech manufacturing. So the game plan here is pretty clear, right? First, you land that massive anchor investment from a giant like Intel. Then you build these enormous state-of-the-art factories, or fabs. These places will create thousands of high-paying tech jobs directly. And maybe just as important, they'll support a whole new ecosystem of local suppliers, basically reviving Ohio's manufacturing DNA for the 21st century. So here we are, full circle. From ancient mound builders to a frontier battleground, from an industrial engine to the nation's political pulse, Ohio's story has consistently been America's story in miniature. Now, as it tries to make this monumental pivot to become the Silicon Heartland, the big question remains. Having so perfectly reflected America's past, will Ohio once again define its future?